eat the bugs or eat a plant-based diet. But if you're a decent, good human being, you won't eat meat. That's the message we're constantly bombarded with these days. And now the real reason for this push to eat insects has been let out. And it happened partially because these people can't hide the scientific fact that raising bugs at a scale needed to feed human beings would be far worse for methane emissions than raising cattle has ever been. And it happened because now they're advocating for eating algae, which is not part of a proper human diet. So let's take a look at these seemingly unrelated stories. A July 2016 article from a pest control website out of the United Kingdom gives us some unpleasant facts that those determined to get us to eat bugs simply won't like. That insect agriculture would be far worse for the environment than cattle agriculture ever could hope to be. Again, that's disregarding the misinformation about cattle production. When we factor in the natural carbon sink that cattle grazing lands are and how grazing on those lands improves their carbon sink capabilities, this isn't even close. Cows are basically carbon neutral, yet we're told the opposite. And we're told that bugs are not only nutritious and delicious, which is on its face a stupid lie, but that they don't create emissions problems. Well, according to this article, that's actually far from true. In fact, they're actually far worse than cows. From the article, quote, "It's well known that cattle, sheep, and even elephants generate the greenhouse gas methane. On average, a cow releases between 70 and 120 kilograms of methane per year. Methane is also 25 times more potent than carbon dioxide in terms of potential to intensify thermometer problems, according to the relevant authorities on that stuff. Yet studies have now shown that insect flatulence may account for 1/5 of all the methane emissions on the planet. Insects, such as centipedes, termites, and beetles, are all major producers of methane. Cockroaches, however, are the only one which is considered a pest in the UK, as they are carriers of harmful bacteria, particularly Salmonella. Cockroaches release more methane in relation to their body weight than any other creature in Britain. Yes, that includes cows, folks. The American cockroach, for example, can give off up to 35 grams a year of methane, which is more than 43 times their average body weight. Even after death, they can continue to release methane for up to 18 hours, making cockroaches among the biggest contributors to the thermometer problem, we'll call it." End quote. So cockroaches are far worse for the environment than cattle. Bugs in general are. This isn't a unique problem to cockroaches. And again, we're talking about scale. If they want to replace cows with cockroaches, you're going to have a massive problems on your hands. All insect varieties, the powers that shouldn't be tell us will solve this problem that they allege we have, are actually far worse than cows, pigs, chickens, and are really more responsible for environmental problems than what we're told cattle is. Think about it. Cockroaches produce 43 times their body weight in methane. Now think about the number of cockroaches needed to be raised in what would be a factory environment to produce adequate protein to feed the human population. That's saying nothing, by the way, about the quality of that protein. It's just enough to feed human beings minimally. The end result will be an increase in methane emissions just from that production alone, not a decrease. And this isn't even factoring in all the health consequences of eating insects, which we've talked about in the past. Now, here's the thing. The big industrial advocates for replacing meat with bugs actually know this already. The big World Economic Forum advocates for replacing beef with bugs know this as well. So why are they promoting this? For money and for control. A few years ago, it came out that these same powers that shouldn't be are in the process of designing a system that will allow them to track every single leaf of spinach and grain of rice produced anywhere in the world. Or so they say. It may seem fantastical, but it involves some sort of micro barcode tracking system placed on food. It's not as far-fetched as people think. But what would be the point of doing that? Money and control. They say it's to know where food that came into contact with Salmonella or E. coli originated. And fine, I can see that, but that's not the reason you build an elaborate tracking system like that. Just like some phantom problems with a thermometer are not why you destroy a food system that has been in place for minimum of 15,000 years or so of human history. But money and control are things that will drive the smartest people to doing the stupidest things. Let me give you another example. Veg News, one of my favorite vegan websites, publishes this tone-deaf article that only sounds good if you've gone so far outside of the normal view of food that you're, willing to advocate for things that no human being wants to eat. And there are plenty of people doing that. Headline from Veg News. Shifting from meat to algae could feed 10 billion people by 2050, research says. In that narrow strip of land, we can produce more than all the protein that the world will need, Cornell University researcher Charles Green says. And you have to be a college professor to believe something that ridiculous, to be honest. Not all protein is made the same. It just isn't. But let me ask you a basic question here. How, pray tell, do you think they're going to make algae edible for humans? By processing it, heavily processing it. You won't eat an algae salad or mystery sludge or something. You'll be eating some frozen meal or boxed meal with algae as the protein source, hidden with things that you're more willing to eat. That's how they'll do it. Picture algae spaghetti. Relying on heavily processed foods again as the way to promote a allegedly clean environment and human health, which is just nonsense on stilts, to borrow my favorite phrase from the philosopher Jeremy Bentham. From an article, quote, growing nutritious protein-dense microalgae onshore seawater-fed agriculture systems could help increase food production by more than 50% and feed a projected 10 billion people by 2050, according to new research published in peer-reviewed ocean science journal Oceanography. Authored by researchers from Cornell, Stanford, and Duke universities, the report describes how growing algae could be an environmentally sustainable solution to carbon emissions-intensive animal agriculture. Onshore algae farms could also close a projected gap in society's future nutritional demands, while simultaneously reducing the current food system's detrimental impacts on the environment, land use, freshwater resources, and biodiversity. Now here we have something from one of the scientists involved. We have an opportunity to grow food that is highly nutritious, fast-growing, and we can do it in environments where we're not competing for other uses, Charles Green, Cornell University professor emeritus of Earth and Atmospheric Sciences, and the paper's senior author, said in a statement. And because we're growing it in relatively enclosed and controlled facilities, we don't have the same kind of environmental impacts. End quote. Sure you don't. There's a lot of myths there. Bad lies being promoted for evil reasons, and yes, I'll call them evil. That article is filled with the same nonsense about there being too many people, which isn't true. We've been told that a population bomb was going off since like the 18th century, and that exactly hasn't come to pass, and probably won't unless something disrupts the food system. Like, oh, I don't know what happened in 2020 is just one example. Then you might run into some problems, but human population growth is tapering off in many places, and will continue to do so as the 21st century progresses. That's practically almost a consensus agreement on that at this point. One of the fascinating things this article tells us is that we don't have enough agricultural land, which is frankly just silly. There's more than enough land to graze beef and lamb on to feed everyone on the planet if we wanted to. We just have to cut back on growing a lot of things we shouldn't be eating, like sugar and plants that we use for producing sugar. I'm not saying we should force everyone on the planet to an animal-based life. We shouldn't do that to anybody, far from it, but it is feasible to feed everyone that kind of diet if it ever became an issue. What that article never addresses, though, is cost. Here's why they want bugs and algae and soy and the rest of it. Algae is very cheap to produce. Very, very cheap, even at huge scale. That's why they want it. It's cheap, and more importantly, you and I cannot grow algae effectively on our own, and we cannot process it into food that would be okay eating. Not on our own, not in our kitchens. It takes infrastructure and expertise, meaning our food gets controlled by the most trustworthy people in the world. And that's what this is about. Money and control. Control over your food. And think about this logically. What happens when your access to food is entirely controlled by others? You comply with what they want. It's as simple as that. Sounds a little out there? Maybe. But what events in the past few years makes anyone think that they want anything else but control over every aspect of every individual life out there? Now, what do you think about these stories? Are you surprised that cockroaches produce 43 times their body weight in methane, which is way more than a cow produces? Are you surprised that algae is being pushed as a human food when, I mean, that's fish food. It is literally fish food. Are you surprised by any of this? Let me know in the comments, please. Like and subscribe if you haven't. It really does help. As is sharing this on social media, that helps a lot as well. I'm Anthony Stine, the Practical Carnivore, and thanks for watching today.